Unexpected encounters. Champagne glass trembled slightly in Zoe's hand as she surveyed the opulent ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with white roses that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She tugged at the borrowed emerald dress her best friend had insisted she wear. Feeling like an imposter among the designer gowns and tailored suits, "You came." Sarah rushed over, her wedding dress flowing behind her like a cloud. "I wasn't sure you'd make it after your double shift at the community center." Zoe forced a smile. "Wouldn't miss your big day." The truth was, she'd almost canceled. Between teaching art classes at the underfunded community center, tutoring kids after school, and working weekend shifts at a coffee shop, she barely had energy for sleep. Let alone socializing with Sarah's new corporate crowd. Sarah squeezed her arm. "Mingle. Have fun. There are some really interesting people here." She glanced toward a group of men in expensive suits. "Like that architect over there, Rithen something. Apparently, he designed that new sustainable housing complex downtown." Before Zoe could respond, Sarah was whisked away by her mother-in-law. Zoe found herself alone again, nursing her champagne and trying to look like she belonged. The irony wasn't lost on her. She spent her days teaching children to express themselves through art. Yet here she was, struggling to find her own voice in this glittering world. Zoe, oh my God, Zoe Martinez. Her blood ran cold. She turned to see Derek approaching with a stunning blonde on his arm, his smile as perfectly practiced as she remembered. Her ex-boyfriend looked exactly the same, charming, confident, and completely aware of his effect on people. Derek. She managed to keep her voice steady. "What a surprise, isn't it? This is Amanda, my fiancée. Amanda, this is Zoe, the one I told you about." His tone was casual, but Zoe caught the subtle dig, the one he'd told her about probably as a cautionary tale about dating someone beneath his social status. Amanda extended a manicured hand. "So nice to meet you. Derek mentioned you're still teaching." The question dripped with polite condescension. "Yes." "I love it," Zoe replied, lifting her chin slightly. She wouldn't apologize for her choices, not to Derek, and certainly not to his carbon copy girlfriend. "That's admirable," Amanda said, the pause speaking volumes. "It must be so fulfilling to work with underprivileged children." Zoe felt heat rising in her cheeks. She was about to respond when a warm hand settled on her lower back. "There you are, sweetheart," a smooth voice said behind her. "I've been looking everywhere for you." She turned to find herself looking into the most striking green eyes she'd ever seen. The man was tall, with dark hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his fingers through it, and he wore his expensive suit with the kind of casual confidence that came naturally rather than through practice. "Sorry, darling. Our call ran long," he continued seamlessly, leaning down to kiss her cheek. His lips were warm against her skin. She caught the faint scent of cedar and something uniquely masculine. Zoe's mind went blank for a moment. But something in his eyes, a mixture of mischief and genuine kindness, made her play along. "Okay," she heard herself saying. "Derek, Amanda, this is—" She paused, realizing she had no idea what his name was. "Ethan," he supplied smoothly, extending his hand to Derek. "Ethan Cross, we are." Behind the mask, Derek's confident demeanor faltered slightly as he shook Ethan's hand. "Derek Williams. And this is my fiancée, Amanda." Ethan's grip was firm, his smile polite but with an edge that made Derek shift uncomfortably. "Pleasure to meet you both. I hope you're enjoying the celebration." "Absolutely," Amanda chimed in, her eyes appraising Ethan with renewed interest. "What do you do, Ethan?" "Architecture," he replied simply, his arms still resting protectively around Zoe's waist. "Mainly sustainable design projects." Derek's expression shifted to recognition. "Wait, Ethan Cross. You designed the Riverside complex, didn't you?" "That project was featured in Architectural Digest, among others," Ethan said with practiced modesty. Zoe felt him tense slightly at the recognition, as if fame was something he endured rather than enjoyed. "Well," Derek said, his voice taking on that overly friendly tone he used when he met someone he considered useful. "We should definitely catch up sometime. I'm in real estate development now." "Perhaps," Ethan replied non-committally. "If you'll excuse us, I promised Zoe a dance. Before Derek could respond, Ethan was guiding her toward the dance floor. Zoe's heart hammered as they moved away from the awkward encounter. "Thank you," she whispered, as Ethan pulled her into his arms for a slow song. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said, his voice low and serious. "That guy was being a complete ass to you." Zoe looked up at him, surprised by the genuine anger in his eyes. "You don't even know me. Why would you care?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, leading her through the dance with surprising grace. "Maybe because I recognize the look someone gets when they're being made to feel small by people who think money makes them better than everyone else." There was something raw in his voice that made Zoe study his face more carefully. Beneath the polished exterior, she glimpsed something vulnerable awareness that seemed at odds with his apparent success. "Speaking from experience?" she asked. Gently, his laugh was bitter. "You could say that. When people find out what I do, what I have, they either want something from me, or they assume I'm like every other wealthy jerk they've met." He met her eyes. "Your ex clearly thought you weren't good enough for his new life. His loss." They danced in comfortable silence for a few moments before Zoe spoke again. "So what's your story, mysterious rescuer? Besides the architecture and the knight tin-shining armor routine." "No routine," he said, spinning her gently. "Just couldn't stand watching someone dim their light because some idiot made them feel like they weren't worth the space they occupy." Zoe felt her breath catch. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Ethan said. "I know you work 3 jobs doing something you love instead of taking the easy path. I know you're here supporting your friend, even though you're exhausted. I know you have the most genuine smile I've seen all evening. How could you possibly know all that? Sarah mentioned you're an art teacher when she introduced us earlier. Said you work yourself to the bone because you believe every kid deserves access to creativity." He paused. "And the smile thing? That's just observation." Zoe felt warmth spread through her chest. "You've been watching me?" "Hard not to," he admitted, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "You're the only person here who looks like they'd rather be anywhere else, yet you're still genuinely happy for your friend. It's refreshing." "Refreshing," Zoe repeated with a small smile. "That's not exactly the word most people use to describe me." "What word do they use?" "Stubborn and practical, idealistic." She shrugged. "Derek used to say I was naive for thinking I could change the world one art class at a time." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Derek's an idiot. Maybe," Zoe conceded. "But he wasn't entirely wrong. I do live in a fantasy world sometimes, believing that passion matters more than profit, that creativity can heal people, that art can make a difference. That's not fantasy," Ethan said firmly. "That's hope. And hope is the most valuable thing in the world." Something in his voice made her look at him more closely. "You sound like someone who's lost his." Ethan's steps faltered almost imperceptibly. "Maybe I am." Morning after Clara Tithe, morning sun filtered through the blinds of Zoe's cramped studio apartment, casting geometric shadows across her easel and the stack of ungraded art projects on her kitchen table. She sat cross-legged on her bed, still, wearing the emerald dress from the night before, staring at the business card Ethan had pressed into her hand before they parted ways. "Ethan Cross, Sustainable Architecture," she read aloud for the 10th time, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. On the back, he'd written his personal number in neat handwriting, along with a simple message: "In case you want to continue. Our conversation's somewhere quieter." The wedding felt like a dream now. After their dance, they'd spent hours talking in a quiet corner of the venue, sharing stories and laughing in a way that felt both new and familiar. Ethan had told her about his childhood in foster care, how he'd put himself through school and built his firm from nothing. She'd shared her dreams of opening a community art center, her struggles with self-doubt, and her fear that she was wasting her potential on impossible ideals. But now, in the harsh light of Monday morning reality, Zoe wondered if she'd imagined the connection. Men like Ethan didn't fall for women like her. He probably helped strangers all the time. It was likely just his way of being polite at social events. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Thank you so much for coming yesterday. Who was that gorgeous man you were with? Two looked amazing together." Zoe set the phone aside without responding. How could she explain that Ethan was essentially a stranger who'd rescued her from an awkward moment? That their entire evening together was built on a pretense? She forced herself to get ready for another day at the community center, shoving the business card into her jewelry box where she kept things that were too precious to throw away but too painful to look at regularly. Across town, Ethan stood in his penthouse office, staring out at the city skyline he'd helped shape. The morning meeting with potential investors had gone well. They'd approved funding for his next sustainable housing project, but he felt hollow inside, the same emptiness that had plagued him for months. He couldn't stop thinking about Zoe, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her students, how she'd thrown her head back and laughed at his terrible jokes, the gentle way she'd touched his arm when he'd shared something personal. For the first time in years, he'd felt genuinely seen by someone who wanted nothing from him. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Cross, your 2 o'clock is here." "Send them in," Ethan replied, straightening his tie and pushing thoughts of Zoe aside. He had a business to run, projects to complete, a reputation to maintain. Last night had been a pleasant interlude, nothing more. But as the day wore on, he found his concentration slipping. During the design review, he sketched doodles in the margins of his notes, a woman's profile, laughing eyes, hands gesturing expressively. His team exchanged glances, but said nothing. Ethan Cross was known for his intense focus, not his daydreaming. By evening, both Zoe and Ethan had convinced themselves that the connection they'd felt was a product of champagne, wedding magic, and loneliness. Zoe graded papers while eating leftover takeout, telling herself she was too busy for romantic complications anyway. Ethan worked late on blueprints, using familiar routine to drown out the voice in his head that kept whispering about genuine smiles and the scent of jasmine. Perfume yet neither could quite shake the memory of dancing together, of finding someone who understood their particular brand of loneliness. Zoe found herself pausing while reviewing her students' artwork, remembering Ethan's words about hope being the most valuable thing in the world. Ethan caught himself designing a small community space into his latest project, thinking about art, classes, and children's laughter. 3 days passed, then 4. Both told themselves they were being practical, realistic, mature about the situation. Both were lying. On Thursday evening, Zoe finally pulled Ethan's business card from her jewelry box, turning it over in her hands. She'd written his number in her phone twice and deleted it both times. What would she even say? "Hi, remember me? The fake girlfriend from the wedding?" Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his office, Zoe's contact information pulled up on his computer screen. Sarah had given it to him when he'd casually asked about her friend, but he'd been staring at it for an hour without typing a single word. Both were waiting for a sign, a reason to reach out that wouldn't make them vulnerable. Neither realized that vulnerability was exactly what the other was hoping for, proof that the connection had been real, that someone else was struggling with the same what-ifs and maybes. The standoff continued. Two people circling the possibility of something genuine, both too scared to make the first move. The gesture Friday afternoon brought an unexpected disruption to Zoe's carefully maintained a routine of not thinking about Ethan Cross. She was cleaning paintbrushes after her advanced class when Maria Santos, the community center director, appeared. In the doorway with an expression Zoe had never seen before, a mixture of excitement and bewilderment. "Zoe, you need to see this," Maria said, holding an elegant cream-colored envelope. "It was delivered by courier an hour ago." Zoe dried her hands on her apron, curious. "What is it?" "Open it and find out." Inside the envelope was an invitation printed on thick, expensive paper. "The Riverfront Gallery cordially invites you to attend the opening of Emerging Voices. New Perspectives in Community Art featuring the work of Zoe Martinez." Below that, in Ethan's familiar handwriting, "Your students weren't the only ones. Inspired by your teaching, these pieces deserve to be seen. No pretending this time, just your art and the truth of what you create. Tonight, 7 p.m., Zoe's hands shook as she read the invitation twice, then 3 times. "Maria, I don't understand. I've never submitted anything to the Riverfront Gallery. How did they even get my work?" Maria was grinning now. "Honey, I may have mentioned to a certain architect that you keep your best pieces locked away in the storage closet because you don't think they're good enough. I might have also given him the storage room key when he stopped by Tuesday morning. You did what? Zoe's voice pitched higher. Maria, those paintings are personal. They're not ready for public viewing. Some of them are just experiments, emotional. Releases after difficult days exactly, Maria interrupted. They're real. There you said. Apparently someone thinks the world needs to see that. Zoe sank into one of the tiny plastic chairs meant for 8-year-olds, the invitation fluttering to the floor. I can't do this. What if people hate them? What if they think I'm pretentious for displaying work that's so ... raw? What if they love them? Maria countered gently. What if someone sees your painting of that little boy's first successful watercolor and remembers why art matters? What if your series about hope in dark places helps someone feel less alone? Zoe closed her eyes, remembering Ethan's words about hope being the most valuable thing in the world. Had he really seen something in her work worth sharing, or was this just another rescue mission like the night they met? He went to a lot of trouble, Maria added softly. The Riverfront Gallery doesn't just host anyone. They're selective, prestigious. For them to agree to this exhibition, she trailed off meaningfully. How do you know all this? Because I called them after you ran to the bathroom to hyperventilate. The curator said Mr. Cross brought in 12 of your pieces on Tuesday. She said she's never seen him so passionate. About promoting someone else's work? Apparently he spent 2 hours explaining the story behind each painting, the techniques you used, the emotions they captured. Zoe felt her cheeks burn. He had no right to do that without asking me. Didn't he? Maria challenged. Sweetie, you've been hiding your light under a bushel for years. Maybe it took someone from the outside to see what the rest of us have been. Trying to tell you, your art has power. It has value. Deserves to be shared. That evening, Zoe stood outside the Riverfront Gallery, her stomach churning with nerves. She'd changed clothes 4 times, 4 settling on a simple black dress and her favorite silver earrings, the ones her grandmother had given her for luck. Through the large windows, she could see people milling about, wine glasses in hand, examining paintings on pristine white walls. Her paintings? On those walls, she recognized several pieces immediately. The watercolor of children's hands covered in paint. The oil painting of an elderly man learning to draw at her adult education class. The abstract piece she'd created after a particularly difficult day when one of her students had confided about abuse at home. Ethan stood near the back of the gallery, talking quietly with a woman in an elegant pantsuit, probably the curator. He wore a navy suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, and his hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his fingers through it. When he looked up and saw her through the window, his face transformed with relief and something that looked like hope. He made his way toward the entrance, but Zoe stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed. This was too much, too fast, too public. What if she disappointed him? What if her work didn't live up to whatever story he'd told about her? But then she saw a young couple standing in front of her painting titled, After the Storm, a Piece. She'd created during her darkest period after Derek left. The woman was crying softly, and her partner had his arm around her shoulders. They were nodding at each other, having some private conversation that Zoe's work had apparently sparked. Maybe. Maria was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Zoe took a deep breath, pushed open the gallery door, and stepped into her future. New Beginnings Ethan met her just inside the gallery entrance, his green eyes searching her face for any sign of anger or resentment. Zoe, you had no right, she said quietly, but her voice held no real heat. Around them, people moved between her paintings, some pausing to read the small placards describing each piece, others standing in contemplative silence. I know, he admitted. But I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, that you lived in a fantasy world. You don't. You live in the real world and somehow manage to find beauty in it, hope in it. That's not fantasy. That's a gift. Zoe watched a teenage girl stare transfixed at her painting of a child's first successful art project. You could have asked me first. Would you have said yes? She considered this honestly. Probably not. That's why I didn't ask. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. Zoe, I've been successful by most people's standards, but I've never created anything that made someone feel less alone. You do that every day. This feels like another rescue, she said, gesturing at the gallery. First Derek, now my self-doubt. I don't need saving, Ethan. His expression grew serious. You're right. I'm sorry. I have this terrible habit of trying to solve problems with money and connections instead of just ... being present. It's easier than risking actual emotional investment. The honesty in his voice made her look at him more closely. Why did you really do this? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching an elderly man nod approvingly at her series about aging with dignity. Because Tuesday morning, after I saw your work, I went home to my perfect apartment and realized how empty it felt. Are full of life, of connection, of purpose. I wanted to be part of that somehow, by putting me on display, by believing in you when you don't believe in yourself, he corrected gently. The way you believed in me when you said hope was valuable. Zoe felt her resolve wavering. Ethan, we barely know each other. What if this is just wedding magic? What if we're completely incompatible in real life? Then we'll find out over coffee tomorrow morning, he said simply. No galleries, no rescue damsel scenarios. Just two people getting to know each other. Honestly, and if we are incompatible, then at least you'll know your art can move people to tears, he said, nodding toward the young couple still standing before after the storm. That's not nothing, Zoe. That's everything. She looked around the gallery one more time, a stranger's connecting with her work, at the evidence of her own courage finally displayed for the world to see. Coffee sounds terrifying, she admitted. Terrifying in a good way, or terrifying in a runaway way? Zoe smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt all week. Terrifying in a maybe this is worth the risk way. Ethan's answering smile was brilliant. I know a place that makes terrible coffee, but excellent pancakes. Very low pressure, very normal. Normal sounds perfect, Zoe said, and meant it as they walked through her exhibition together, no longer pretending to be anything other than to people taking a chance on something real. Zoe realized that sometimes the most genuine connections came not from perfect moments, but from choosing to be vulnerable with someone willing to do the same. The next morning's coffee would be the first honest conversation of whatever they were building together. No masks, no pretenses, just the beautiful, terrifying possibility of letting someone truly see her and choosing to look back just as honestly.